We are halfway through the Bad Batch Season 3, so we are going to be doing a little mid-season review, if you will. So we're going to talk about where this story has taken us, maybe touch on a few of our predictions that we had made earlier on, a month and a half ago, and then maybe make some new ones if those haven't stood the test of time, or double down on them. We'll see. So that's where we're going. But before we hop into the Bad Batch, Kevin, the Acolyte trailer. I know you've seen it. Just really quickly, what are your quick thoughts? Because in a week or two, we should probably do an Acolyte episode.
Same thing. We definitely need to do a trailer breakdown.
Yeah.
Just because you can't. There's so much that happens in that trailer. So many snippets and little things. It's a Disney trailer, right? They do great jobs with the trailers, and so it looks cool. I mean, I think if they can stick the tone and the just kind of the imagery of the trailer, I feel like it could be really good. I feel like if it kind of follows suit with how the trailer went, it'll be a really cool, really intriguing story. I love the mysterious aspect of it. So I was already looking forward to it. Now I'm just like super stoked for June. So yeah, I think it's gonna be really good.
I wasn't so for this, I'm excited for all Star Wars that comes out, first of all. But this one, I mean, it probably wasn't the top of my list, as far as everything coming out this year. But now I think it may be the top of my list. The trailer was so mysterious, like you said.
Yeah.
A lot of darkness in it. Obviously, like seeing all the Jedi is a really cool thing, especially for that time period that we haven't seen in live action. So that was cool. I was watching Dark Side Secrets today. So like we're filming this on Wednesday. So Tony, Will, and Mortis FM, Grayson with Mortis FM was on it. And so they were talking about like a lot of different things that I didn't even think about. Like maybe Ilum is going to be in maybe we saw that in the trailer. Different things like that. Maybe they're on Kashyyyk is where they're picking this Wookiee up at. So just a lot of different parts to that. And like, there's a lot of layers to this show that I think we're gonna be surprised with once we get there. So really excited for the Acolyte. Can't wait. In a couple weeks, we'll kind of have an Acolyte, not a prediction show, but just maybe talking about the trailer and where we think maybe it's going. We'll have official predictions on down the road, once we get closer to June 4th. But I think it's going to be a pretty good show.
Yeah, I do too. I told you I'm trying to avoid as much as I can leaks and spoilers because I love the mystery behind this show right now. I think that's going to be a really cool element to it. So
it has so much potential. I will say that. Yeah. So let's move into the Bad Batch. So we kind of kicked it around a little bit. What we thought maybe 3 or 4 big things are from this season that we can touch on. So there's going to be like sub points within all this. So don't just listen to these 4 things and think, oh, they're missing this. There's going to be more. Hang around. But we're going to have Crosshair's story. I think that's been a focal point for sure. Yeah. How it relates to Omega. We'll hit on that. Then the hunt for Omega. So we're going to hit like, okay, all these people, the Empire is full-fledged after her, but also the opposite of the hunt, right? So protecting Omega. Yeah. There's going to be the clones, like where do they stand in all this? So we'll touch on that Shadow clone, CX2. We'll touch on Wolf, all of that. And then lastly, the whole Tantiss, M-count, what are they up to there type of thing. So I think those are some pretty big things. So that last one will obviously hit on like Hemlock, Palpatine, Omega with the Midichlorians, all that good stuff. So it's crazy to think we're halfway through, first of all. Like, I think we were just making predictions, it feels like yesterday, and now we're technically over halfway through. So 8 episodes through, there's 15 of these. So we've got like 6 more weeks of the Bad Batch or something like that. And then it's over, which is kind of sad because it's over when it happens. It's not like, oh, next season. Like, no, we probably don't have Bad Batch after this. They're all probably going to be goners. So kind of crazy to think. But Crosshair's story, we start off with Crosshair and Omega on Tantiss. So the focus is on the 2 of them. he's really come a long way in this season, right? So season 2, it's kind of sad, watching him be one of the bad guys, and then at the end, he makes that turn. But then he's a prisoner because he makes that turn. So you kind of see him just in a really low spot. And obviously, I mean, I don't want to say it was unsurprising, but it was painted to where he's going to be making a turn. Like Omega's not giving up on him. She's pestering him when he's a prisoner, things like that. They break out within the first 90 minutes of the Bad Batch, So, I mean, we kind of know where it's going.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I would have hated it to have been like, oh, we don't have any answers on him until it's almost over, and then it's really over. So having a good season where he gets this redemption arc, I'm really digging that, because as a cold character, like that's what he is. He's a cold character. He's kind of distant, but he's making such a big connection with Omega. A few episodes back, he's kind of reconciling with Hunter. So we're getting a lot out of his character, which I think is probably going to make it all the more tragic once we kind of get to the end of this. But what do you make of Crosshair this season?
No, I think they've done a really good job of pacing out his story. It could have been easy to throw him back in and have him right back into the mix of things and right back to being regular Crosshair, but his journey it has not played out how he would want it to, right? He doesn't feel like he's himself. It's been really interesting to see him try to figure out what it looks like to reintegrate back, right? Like after making these mistakes and carrying that guilt. So I like how they're pacing it out. They had the mission back at the outpost where he had that really cool moment with the helmets.
Yeah.
He was picking up the clone helmets. That was really cool. And then, he saves Hunter, and there seems to be some of that connection and camaraderie kind of redeveloping. But then I love that in the very next episodes, we find out that he hasn't been telling everything either, though, right? We find out they tried to condition him into one of those shadow troopers, and they can't really talk about it because they're on the run. But I love that they're still kind of inkling in some things that maybe he still hasn't told them everything, right? Like, not that he's bad, not that he's not on their side, but I love that he still quite hasn't been revealed as to what all went on, what all's going on with him.
Yeah.
And to your point, the connection with Omega was really fun to see this last episode. Just they're stuck there, right, on Pabu by themselves, and seeing her worm her way in the way she does with all the clones, right? Like she just figures out a way to get in their graces, and so it was cool to see that connect. That was probably the best part of this last episode. You and I mentioned it was the closest to filler we've gotten. Not a whole lot progresses in this episode, but I do love seeing that nature in their relationship and seeing him be a little bit softer, really out of necessity, right? Because the hard-edged loyalty to the Empire thing didn't work out for him, so he's having to find another way, which has been good. It's been fun to watch, and so I mean, I'm excited for what they do within the rest of the season, because again, I feel like so far through this first half, I like that it's not just solved, right? That he's still got issues and it's a work in progress. So,
and they also keep hitting on the fact that like his hand's not well. They keep coming back to that over and over. Right. So maybe every 2 or 3 episodes they'll make reference of it, and so like this most recent episode, they're talking, he still can't make the shot, and Omega's like, oh, it's close enough, but he deals in absolutes, right? It's a hit or it's a miss. And so I just keep thinking at the very end of all this, the most gratifying thing that's going to happen is that he does make the shot. Something's going to happen, and he's going to make it, and like it's going to be like something that's been built up for the whole season, but I can't wait to see that actually happen. That's going to be like his character arc is he makes the shot, which is cool.
And I feel like even though we all kind of see it coming, it'd be disappointing if it didn't happen at this point.
It would be, yeah.
I think even though we kind of see it coming, we want it to happen, right? We kind of want that satisfaction from seeing it. So I will be really disappointed if something like that doesn't happen at this point.
They'll never show this on screen, but if he makes the shot on Hemlock, that would be so cool. Like it's not a thing that they will show, because that would probably be like a little much, but Making the headshot on
cool,
Hemlock would be a cool thing for him to do.
Some good redemption there. Yeah.
Maybe they will. But yeah, so Crosshair's story, I haven't heard anyone who's not like pretty into his story at this point. Kind of moving from there, getting into Omega. So the Empire has big interest in her, which we'll hit a lot on later, right? So we'll touch on that with Tantiss and the M count and everything. But essentially, her blood is what they need, and that's been a big focal point from early on. Like the first episode, I believe they kind of hit on that, and then it's solidified by the third episode when Omega and Crosshair escape. So Omega is the key to whatever this project is that the Empire's doing, which we'll touch on in a few minutes. So the full force of the Empire's after. We kind of had a picture from the trailer that it was going to mean bounty hunters because we saw Fennec, we saw Cad Bane, we saw Asajj in the trailer. So we see a bunch of people who are bounty hunters during this time frame show up in the trailers. We're like, oh, they're probably after Omega, right? So we kind of do get some confirmation of that. But the Fennec thing, she's not hunting for Omega, she's helping Omega. So this kind of conflict that I think we're going to see this next arc probably is going to be Omega being hunted by these bounty hunters, but also being shielded from them by the Bad Batch, by maybe Asajj, Fennec, things like that. I say that's probably our next arc that leads us up into the last 3 or 4 episodes, which would be however they wrap this up. So I'm excited for the little bounty hunter wars that maybe we're going to see coming up over the next few episodes. It's not necessarily a new thing to Star Wars, right? Like the heroes being hunted by a bounty hunter, but what do you make of all of the bounty hunters? And it's not just any bounty hunters. It's like, what did they say in this week's episode? Like the first class bounty hunters or something like that? Like they're after her?
Well, her and just, they noted like any M count specimens, right?
Yeah.
Any targets that had M counts, which is, we'll talk about that. But, yeah, no, I you can see it brewing. I think it'll be really cool. We know Cad Bane pops up at some point. You and I were talking. Asajj is the big reveal we're still waiting on. Which, if I was a betting man, maybe that's who Fennec was talking to, right? Like this feels
Seems
like
that way.
Bring her in a meaningful way, and so hopefully we get that next. And so it would be really cool if we get opposing sides, right? Some of the bounty hunters that are trying to work with the Bad Batch, and some that are obviously after Omega. I wouldn't mind seeing a Cad Bane Asajj fight. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be cool.
So yeah, there's a lot left to do. There's a lot of characters that we know are going to pop up that still need to be brought in. And I think you're right. I think it is going to be kind of this balance between whether it's the clone shadows from the Empire, the bounty hunters, and then on the other side, the Bad Batch trying to use their connections carefully, right? Like who they talk to and who they work with, hopefully not get betrayed by what they're trying to do to protect her. So yeah, oh gosh. I'll be happy if this season just pretends she doesn't exist anymore.
She'll have to show up, I feel like. I don't know, but it'd be cool if she didn't.
Man, when was the last time you knew of a character that was just so universally hated by everyone? I haven't heard of it. Maybe there's somebody, but I haven't heard anybody talk well about Sid. So
no, that's rough. That's how, obviously it's kind of how she was written into the second season, but like it is. I mean, you can even go to the sequels, and I mean, there's a big group on both sides there, but everyone hates Sid, which that probably means they wrote a pretty good
maybe that
character,
was the goal,
right? Yeah. So I don't know, but yeah, this Omega hunt, I feel like it was probably the least surprising thing of the season, right? Because they're going to be after her. They're going to be after the Bad Batch. So this hunt isn't anything that's like a shocker, but I'm still excited to see it happen. So I think that's probably, like we said, our next 3 to 4 episodes, depending on how big the arc is to close the season out. Going from this, though, the hunt to Omega, getting into the clone story, because again, we got to get a lot of closure in this story, right? Because we know the Empire is going to be phasing out clones. That's really been something. Did they start hinting that in season 1, or was it just season 2?
Oh gosh, it's all blurred together. I can't
I
remember.
think it was season 1,
season
because you get Tarkin kind of early on where he's like, I'll be the one to decide if we're keeping the clones or not. And then season 2, they get into like the social aspect of getting rid of the clones, like how they're going to retire them and stuff like that. So season 3, it would only make sense for that story to kind of close up. And we see that they're just testing like all this blood on all these different clones and things like that. And then obviously they're incorporating the conscripted troopers, but they're still using the clone commandos. Then we have like those shadow clones, the CX2 that's there, and everyone wants to know who that is. Then Wolf shows up with his crew. I mean, my gosh, if we got the bounty hunter thing going next, when are we gonna kind of tie this clone story in as well? Maybe they just kind of overlook it until the last few episodes. I don't know, but it's a big story point.
It is. Hopefully it'll. I mean, I could see it overlapping with a lot of the Bad Batch resolution stuff too, right? Like I feel like those things could coincide to an extent. So I think there's time left, but man, that is honestly the clone story is one of the things that I'm most interested in seeing how it develops and what happens, right? Like I've always been just really interested in the clones, and even with the Clone Wars, I mean, amidst all the Jedi and the cool stuff that was happening, they kind of became my favorite part of that show. It's just because it was really cool to see their personalities take shape and these different dynamics. And so coming to the conclusion of this group, that's one of the things I really am most looking forward to is how is this going to resolve and what's it going to look like? Because there's some interesting things going on, right? We got a lot to figure out in terms of how they get. Do they just retire them, right? Like, it'll be interesting.
Retire.
Well, so I was curious about this. I went back and watched the Rebels episodes. Where,
with Wolf,
where they find Rex, right?
Yeah,
I think it's in season 2, towards the beginning, where Ahsoka sends them. And we find Rex in a weird place. Like he's been out of touch with Ahsoka. He won't return her calls, and he's just kind of in hiding. Which, thinking about the Rex we have now, into a Rex who has just completely removed himself from this fight, like that's such a hard jump to figure out. Like, what is it that really like something significant has to happen to push that, right? Because that's not Rex we see now, to step back and say, you know what, I don't want any part of this anymore. And it is interesting because he makes the comment in those episodes that he's just like, you know, didn't you hear we got retired? The Emperor retired us or disbanded us. I don't remember what he says. And one of the like communications officers with Callus mentions like that Wolf has contacted him a bunch of times just with like random things that don't make any sense. And so there doesn't seem to be anyone looking for him. Like the Empire's had contact with them. They don't really seem to care. And so I am curious about the dynamic where it ends up that they're just kind of on this world doing their own thing. And it's not necessarily for hiding purposes. It's for getting away purposes. And so, man, how we're going to get there with him and Wolf and Gregor, I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see. And something big's got to happen.
That's a good point because I get there only 7 more episodes to get us. If that is the launching point, right? Like if that's the last time we see them before they go to Rebels. I mean, they could maybe have other stuff planned that we don't know about. But
it's true. I mean, there could always be something else animated, or there could be some sort of crossover with Ahsoka and Rex and a Tales of the Jedi sequence, right? Like.
That's
I guess there's
true.
more space, so it doesn't have to be resolved now, but I mean, it's got to happen at some point, so we'll see.
Yeah, and I guess just kind of going on this clone train of thought, I think we both still agree that there's probably some kind of conflict going to be going on at the end of this season between the clones and the Empire. I would think. It would be weird if it's just like a political declaration like, oh, you're retired, be banished. And then, you know, there's only 3 of them come Rebels. So I feel like something's got to happen. So it's going to be interesting to see how they cram it in the next few weeks, 2 months, I guess, month and a half.
Yeah, and there's some interesting dynamics going on. 'Cause Wolf lets Rex go, right? And he says
At the
something
end,
along the
yeah.
lines of, "They're clones. We owe them that," right?
Yeah,
And so
at
there's
least
this
we owe them that
really,
or something like
yeah,
that.
there's this really interesting. So the clones, they were bred to be loyal, bred to obey, but there's this element of it's almost the loyalty to each other is almost you beginning to usurp their loyalty to the chain of command. And so the
Mm-hmm.
fact that Wolf does not obey, that he does extend more loyalty to Rex than to the Empire, I think that points to the clones. Ultimately their allegiance. You can kind of see where it's shaping to be towards each other, which is a really cool thing, right? I think they probably didn't expect that when they bred them to be loyal, that they would become so loyal to one another.
Yeah.
But I feel like that could be a big breaking part of this story with the Empire is when it comes down to it, are they going to choose each other? Or are they going to choose the Empire? Well, we see Wolf make that decision. He chose his brother, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it'll be interesting to see how that decision plays out when the clones become confronted with this idea of which side do I go? Do I go with my clone brothers, or do I stay loyal to this chain of command?
And on top of all that, we do know about that specialist unit that they're making.
Yeah,
So that shadow group. So
yeah.
we've seen CX2 at this point, and then I guess the one guy they captured in that episode a few weeks ago. But who do you think he is?
Honestly, I'm not going to be surprised if they pull like a Maroc situation,
I
and it's
saw a
just
meme
nobody.
where it was
It's
like
just,
they're pulling the mask off, and it's like, look, it's a Maroc.
yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, it's going to be a nobody. I mean, it'll be a clone, right? There's been a lot of ideas floated around. I don't think it can be a clone of Crosshair because unless they figured something else out, even the accelerated aging is still like 10 years, and so I don't
Yeah,
know
it
how
would
they
take
could
a
have
little while.
grown a clone that quick. I don't think
Yeah,
it's Tech. I firmly believe Tech's dead.
I hope he
And
is.
if the conditioning didn't work on Crosshair because he was defective, you would think it probably wouldn't work on any of the Bad Batch.
Right.
So I don't know. One of the ideas I liked was that I saw somebody, I don't remember who it was, floated the idea that it could be like Commander Cody,
Oh
which would be a
yeah.
big blow. Which would be a big blow to Rex, right? Because they were pretty close, and so that could be something that would be really hard for Rex to cope with if he had to kill
Yeah.
him. So there's
That
some
would
good
be rough
ideas
to
out there,
see,
but
yeah.
I'm also not getting my hopes up because it could just be random Joe Schmo clone um, who never
Yeah.
had a name. So I'm sure we'll find out at some point
That's
soon.
probably the most likely. It's probably the most likely. So, moving into our last big story point before we revisit our predictions, the whole Tantiss arc that I think we're going to get, that we've already got, in the first few episodes. I think 3 episodes maybe is what it started off with, a 2 or 3 episode premiere. Can't remember, but
I think it was 3, yeah.
it's 3. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
because we had Tantiss, then Hunter and Wrecker, then back to
and then
Tantiss.
back to
Yeah,
Tantiss. That's right.
yeah,
So we kind of get a good idea of what's going on. So it's the Emperor's little pet project of how he's going to be doing this whole cloning thing that
yeah,
we jump ahead however so many years it is, and we see it in the sequel trilogy, right? We see it in the comics between episodes 5 and 6. Obviously it's in the sequel trilogy, but also maybe a little bit in the Mandalorian too, because we see that
mm-hmm.
Snoke clone in season 2. I think they're probably trying to tie everything together with this. That's been a big focal point. So obviously Tantiss goes in with the story at large of how Palpatine's trying to be immortal. So that's a huge story point that I think it's easy to forget when we're watching, like, oh,
Yeah,
this is the Bad Batch story with Omega and Crosshair and all that. But no, it's the
yeah,
Star Wars story at large. And so they've got all these clones there. They're doing these testings. Omega's blood can I want to explain this right. So hers is good so that the M count can be put, or the midichlorians, like it can handle it and go into
yeah,
the tester, right? Like into the
yeah,
clone body. I'm pretty sure
yeah.
is the correct logic for that.
Yeah, that's my understanding, is that her blood is a stable environment for
For the
midichlorians, right? And
midichlorians,
so,
yeah.
because it might, I'm assuming that they're dropping the Emperor's blood into those test things
Mm-hmm.
to see if it breaks down, to see if it, because it looks just like blood. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my assumption. And so, yeah, I think they're trying to figure out, this is where I feel like they've done a good job of tying this stuff together. I don't feel like it feels super forced. Like it feels like a good part of this story and
It
the
does.
evolution of Omega's story, right? And so that she was apparently made for this purpose by Nala Se, who tried to hide it.
Yeah.
Um, the fact that she is the key to part of the Emperor's plans and this immortality thing that we see later that he's been working on for a long time. It is, they've done a good job of wrapping that stuff and tying it together in a way that doesn't feel like they were just shoving it together and hoping it worked out. I feel like it
Yeah.
came together pretty well, honestly.
Yeah. And if all this is part of sequel damage control, which I think they're doing a lot of that, obviously, but like it's pretty satisfying because I don't
It's been
think anyone
entertaining,
is
yeah.
super. I mean, the Rise of Skywalker, I've on the record, my least favorite Star Wars movie. I think it's just a cheap way to kind of throw it together. But I mean, I'm not a big fan of the zombie clone Palpatine, but at the same time, I'm a huge fan of them stopping Palpatine from making the zombie clones. So, like,
Yeah.
it's kind of drawing us all in to being invested in this story that, at its base layer, I think a lot of fans weren't too interested in. So, you get little pieces of it in the Mandalorian, you get big chunks of it in the Bad Batch, and so it's probably going to make everything makes sense at some point. So I think they're doing a great job with that. And then I think with as far as Tantiss goes, the way this is moving, that the showdown at the end of this is going to be on Tantiss. They've got to find this base. They're going to have to free these clones or whatever has to happen. And so if they keep trying to get Omega back to Tantiss and that base doesn't exist anymore, that's a win for the good guys. So I think that's where this show is moving towards it's going to have to be a pretty rapid pace coming up.
Yeah, no, I expect, I don't know if today, I don't, maybe this, not to, yeah, today, it was today. Gosh, my
Yeah.
brain's scattered. Um, I really think today's episode was just really kind of easing back into moving the story forward because we had some pretty big things happen in those last two
Yeah.
episodes, and so I fully expect for it to pick back up pretty quickly in next episodes and move forward pretty well. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think having this stuff tied in and knowing that Tantiss is going to be a big part of the conclusion of this story. Um, it makes the rest of it even more intriguing in terms of how they're going to get there and what are they going to do there? Are they taking a clone army there? Like what is that going to look like when this all comes to a head? It's going to be exciting to see that build up over the next several episodes.
I agree. And I think Tantiss is something that has kind of been mentioned in Star Wars lore.
Yeah.
I mean, even the expanded universe. I'm listening to the not the Aftermath, the Heir to the Empire trilogy, and they mentioned Tantiss in there a time or two. So, like, it's cool to see all these things that maybe you hear about in the books or the comics or video games or whatever kind of play out on screen. So that's a cool thing as well, because I listen to these books sometimes and I hear these planets and it's like, I don't know anything about this, but then it's like, oh, I do know kind of about this, even though they're not canon. It helps tie everything together. So that's kind of where we would say we are at the midpoint of the Bad Batch. So before we get into our predictions, I guess let's do ours and then let's say, would you change anything? So my big predictions was, one, we're going to get some Vader at the end of this. I predicted that we were going to have Boba Fett and that it was going to be like kind of a dark ending. As far as those three go, I think the dark ending is still on pace for that. Yeah, it's probably going that way. Yeah. I would say Darth Vader is no less off, right? Like if that was going to happen, it was going to be a very small spurt at the very end or something like that, because it's not going to be something that sucks the life out of the Bad Batch, because then it turns into a Vader show. So I don't think that you can throw that off. It would be a Rogue One-ish ending if that were the case, and that's kind of what I stuck with. And then the Boba Fett is probably like on a wing and a prayer, because it all kind of depends on who Fennec was talking to. Is she buddies with a young Boba Fett yet, or is she talking to Asajj Ventress? Odds are it's Asajj, but maybe Boba still shows up, but I feel like that's the least likely of mine at this point. I still wouldn't change it just because it's, it's not the craziest thing I could have predicted.
Yeah, I think if Vader pops up, it can't be in any sort of meaningful way to the story at this point, because I feel like he's been intentionally left out of the loop for the Emperor's plans here, right? Like,
that's true. Yeah.
For something so important to the Emperor as Tantiss in this cloning experiment, why is he not sending Vader to do this? And he mentioned earlier, like, there's people that wouldn't like this, and so I feel like Vader, he's keeping Vader in the dark on purpose. So it would be harder to bring him in if that's the case.
That's such a good point. And he's intentionally left out. Like in the comics, in canon, which is through the comics, he snoops his way upon Palpatine's cloning thing with Ochi. So you're probably right. Like, Vader is in the dark on purpose. I'd still love to see him.
Like, even if we just, I don't know, something to close out the show. Even if it's just him hunting clones, which would be terribly sad.
Give me a show about that.
Yeah, gosh. Boba Fett.
What were your predictions?
I hope Boba Fett pops up. I'd like to see him. He'd be what, like 13, 14? Because he doesn't accelerate age. He's a regular clone, and he was like 10 or 11 in Attack of the Clones, wasn't he?
Roundabouts, plus 3 years to Revenge of the Sith, plus a couple more. Is it a couple years past Revenge of the Sith?
I'm not. It's hard to know the time frame.
It's not too far. Omega's a little bit older, so I mean, he might be 15 or so. Yeah. But we also know he is bounty hunting at this point, because in Dark Disciple, he is bounty hunting at that point.
Yeah, so right. He's the one who kind of points him towards Asajj. Yeah, I hope we get to see him, because I mean, there's such we get him in Attack of the Clones, and then you're not going to see him again in any meaningful medium for a long time. It'd be really cool to see him in his late teenage years bounty hunting. That'd be really cool.
And they already brought Daniel Logan back to voice those clones early on.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that on. I think it was Star Wars Sith. I think it was Tony.
Yeah, Tony had talked about it. So if they've already brought him back to read those lines, I mean, you just get him to read all the lines in one day, right? So I think that's still a possibility too. Maybe after hearing what you said, it's more of a possibility than Vader. I would still change none of my predictions at this point, though.
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't remember what one of my predictions was. That was so long ago. One of my predictions, which I think can still happen, and I'm holding to, is that at the end of the show, Asajj takes Omega. That's who she departs with. If the Bad Batch get cleared out, I think that's a good pairing. Talking about Dark Disciple, there's some parts in there that lean towards like seeing her kind of have a softer heart towards kids. Like when there's that scene where they're like rescuing those kids and that family, and she's very protective, and so I could see her definitely taking Omega under her wing and them kind of going off and doing their thing. So I know that was one of my predictions, and I hope it happens, and I could still see it happening.
I think that makes logical sense.
I have no idea what my other one was.
Well, so me and you were together on the dark ending. I do remember that.
That's what it was then. Yeah. That may have been what it was.
We did 2 predictions and a hope, I believe.
That's a real safe
right. Like we did 2 predictions and then one thing you hope will happen.
My hope was gone. My hope was like a really awesome Bad Batch get together, like a bounty hunter Avenger team to storm Tantiss.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that's happening, but that would have been cool.
Good. You never know. Never know. So
would have been cool.
That's where we're at. Do you have any midpoint prediction you would like to throw in, just from what you've seen now, that is different?
Midpoint predictions where we are now. I'm going to predict that. Oh gosh, I don't know.
I don't know
I'm
that
gonna
I
say
have
someone.
any.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think someone might die before we get to the conclusion. Like,
Yeah.
I I don't know, but I feel like this doesn't feel like the show where they're just gonna throw it all in at the very end.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we lose someone in the next, I don't know, 3 or 4 episodes.
Maybe with all
But
like
I don't
this
know.
bounty hunter stuff that's about to happen, that could make some sense. I think as far as that goes, it'll go one of two ways. Either like they'll start falling kind of just as we go through it, maybe one episode at a time.
That'd be miserable.
It would be rough. Or you go like the very end, the Rogue One approach, where or not the opposite of the Rogue One approach. It would be more like Deep Impact, like the movie where they blow up the asteroid or whatever. They all just go at the same time. All go together. So
I'd be good with that. I wouldn't
yeah,
mind that at all.
yep.
I feel like that's that can be done pretty cheap, but I feel like that would be an earned payoff for this group. So I would like something like that.
Yeah, and I will say, I think you're gonna have like Crosshair whenever he does go. It'll be something like kind of how Tech said, when have we ever followed orders? I think it'll be the opposite of that. I think Crosshair will do something where he's like, good soldiers follow orders, and then it happens. Something like that. I think that would be such a great payoff for his character.
There's got to be a one-liner there.
Because he's been the good troopers follow orders, right? Like that led him to the bad side. So I think if they're going to round him out, I can hear him telling Omega, like at the very end, good troopers follow orders, and then he makes the shot or something, and the shot cost him as well. I think that would be so cool to see.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential outcomes. So I mean, we're all waiting.
Hanging by a thread here. Yep. So a little bit of housekeeping for next week. Next week is spring break. So Kevin will be off. I'm probably just going to take the week off as well. I may decide to go solo on a Force with Friends podcast. So if one does pop up, that's great. If not, it's spring break. We'll be back the week after. But I do want to say for that episode, I think we should just look at all of the possibilities of where the Acolyte could be going. So not necessarily our predictions, but just what on earth is happening after this trailer. So I think that's a good spot for us just to maybe watch the trailer on here and then talk about it. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, knowing too, because I think it's brought up a lot of questions for people of how it fits in possibly with with the Phantom Menace, and so we can also kind of speculate on how those things are going to be tied together and what that might look like. So there's a lot to talk about with it. I mean, just from 2-minute trailer. So
yeah. So that is a wrap on the 29th Force with Friends podcast. If anyone was wanting to know what number this was, it is 29.
No idea.
Thank y'all so much for watching. If we were only getting a couple views, we probably would have quit at like 3. So we appreciate the group of people that does watch this. Otherwise, let us know in the comments where you think the Bad Batch is going from here, and we will see you next time.